The city of Arvalis glowed like a jewel in the endless darkness of space. Its towers reached high into the clouds, their silver walls reflecting the golden light of the twin suns. At the very heart of the city stood the Dome of Judgment, a massive structure made from crystal-like stone. Inside this hall, the fate of one man was about to be decided. Daniel, the human diplomat, stood in the center of the chamber. A single beam of white light shone down on him from above, marking him as the focus of the trial. His black uniform was clean, his silver rank pin catching the light, but his face showed the strain of days spent under questioning. He had traveled across the stars to negotiate peace between Earth and the alien factions of the Galactic Council, but instead, he now stood accused of a crime he did not commit. Around him, the council seats rose in circles, each level filled with alien representatives from dozens of worlds. The shapes and colors of their forms were as varied as the worlds they came from. Tall figures with skin like glass, smaller beings with insect-like limbs, scaled creatures with golden eyes. Their voices echoed in the chamber, sharp and cold, as they debated his fate. At the highest seat sat the presiding judge, a tall alien with a long, narrow face and robes of deep red. Her voice was deep and smooth, but carried no warmth. "Daniel of Earth," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "You stand accused of breaking the Treaty of Norin, an agreement honored for over 300 years. You are charged with bringing human warships into restricted space and causing the destruction of an agricultural world. How do you answer?" Daniel lifted his head, meeting her gaze without fear. His voice was steady. "I did not break your treaty. I was sent to stop a war, not start. 1. The destruction you speak of was caused by an asteroid strike, not by human hands. I have shared all my records with the Council. You have the truth before you." A murmur passed through the seats, but Daniel could see from their faces that his words were making little impact. Many were not here to seek truth. They had already made their decision before he had even spoken. In the gallery above, a small group of human observers sat tense and silent. Among them was Commander Harris, head of Earth's small diplomatic escort. His jaw was tight, and his eyes kept shifting toward the armed council guards who stood at every exit. They had been given no weapons, no right to interfere. This was the council's ground, and the humans were allowed only to watch. One of the alien delegates, a short being with pale green skin and a crown of soft spines, rose from his seat. "Humans are too dangerous," he declared, his voice high and sharp. "They expand too quickly, take too much, and bring their war machines wherever they go. This man may deny his guilt, but his kind has been preparing for war since they joined the stars." Another delegate, a tall avian with blue and silver feathers, tapped the table in front of her. "Our intelligence confirms his ship entered the restricted zone. That alone is a violation. Intent does not matter. The treaty is clear." Daniel kept his voice calm. "My ship entered to respond to a distress signal. The signal came from your own people. They asked for help when their orbital defense failed. If the Council chooses to punish me for saving lives, then it is justice you have abandoned." The judge's long fingers tapped against the desk before her. "You speak well, human, but you cannot escape the evidence. Records can be altered. Signals can be forged. Words are easy to shape." Daniel could feel the weight of every eye in the chamber on him. He thought of Earth, of the people who had trusted him to bring back a peace agreement. He thought of his family, who believed he was safe here. He knew now that he would not be going home. Commander Harris leaned forward in his seat. "They're not even listening," he whispered to the human aide beside him. "They want to make an example out of us." The aide swallowed hard but said nothing. Both of them knew that speaking out too loudly would be dangerous. The judge raised her hand, and the room fell silent. "This council has heard enough," she announced. "The matter will now move to judgment." The alien delegates began entering their votes on the glowing panels before them. One by one, the panels flashed red. There were no greens, no voices for mercy, only a sea of red light surrounding Daniel. The judge looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "The verdict is guilty. The sentence will be announced tomorrow at first light." Gasps and whispers filled the chamber. Some delegates seemed satisfied, others uneasy, but none spoke against the decision. The guards stepped forward, their armor shining in the light, and took position on either side of Daniel. Daniel's gaze swept the room once more. "If this is the justice of the Galactic Council," he said quietly, "then you have already sown the seeds of your own fall." The guards moved him toward the exit, their grip firm but not cruel. As he walked, he heard the sound of alien voices fading behind him, their words blending into a cold hum. Above, in the gallery, the human observers watched helplessly, their faces pale. Outside the chamber, the air was cooler. The corridor curved in a perfect arc, the walls made from smooth metal inlaid with faint streams of light. The guards led him down the hall toward a holding cell, their footsteps echoing. Daniel did not struggle. His mind was already turning to what would come next. If the council wanted to send a warning to Earth, then they had chosen the wrong man. Because even in chains, he carried something they could not take: the truth and the will of his people. Far. Above the city, in orbit, the small human escort ship floated silent and still. Inside, its crew monitored the trial's broadcast, their anger growing with every word. In their eyes, Daniel was not just a diplomat now. He was a symbol, and symbols had power. As the suns began to set over Arvalese, the dome of judgment glowed, faintly, against the darkening sky. Tomorrow, the sentence would be spoken, and the galaxy would see how far the council was willing to go to make an example of humanity. Morning came to Arvallis with a pale golden light spilling across the towers. The twin suns rose slowly, casting long shadows over the dome of judgment. The air was clear, and the city's streets were already filled with citizens and visitors from dozens of worlds. News of the trial had spread overnight, and people had come to witness the final decision. Inside his cell, Daniel sat on the metal bench, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the small patch of sunlight on the floor. He had not slept. The cold of the night had passed without notice, his mind occupied with the thought of what was to come. The council had found him guilty. All that remained was to hear the punishment. 2 guards arrived, their armor gleaming and their faces hidden behind black visors. They entered the cell without a word. One gestured toward the door. Daniel stood, calm and steady, and followed them into the hall. The sound of their boots on the polished floor was sharp in the quiet corridor. The path to the judgment hall wound through high-arched walkways. Through the crystal-like walls, Daniel could see the city below. Sky platforms carrying goods, hovercraft moving between towers, and citizens gathering near the outer plaza of the dome. He could feel their eyes watching as the guards led him forward. When they entered the hall, the sound struck him first. The galleries were full, every seat taken by delegates, aides, and citizens who had been granted permission to watch. Above, the higher balconies were crowded with more onlookers. The air was thick with tension. The presiding judge sat in her seat at the center of the upper circle. Around her, the council members leaned forward slightly, their attention fixed on the man in the center of the floor. The beam of white light returned, falling on Daniel once more. The judge's deep voice filled the hall. "Daniel of Earth, you have been found guilty of violating the Treaty of Norin. This council will now decide your punishment, in accordance with our laws." Daniel's eyes moved across the faces of the council. Most showed no emotion. A few looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. One delegate, a scaled alien with sharp golden eyes, spoke first. "He must be punished in a way that sends a clear message. Earth must learn that treaties are not to be broken without consequence." Another, The blue-feathered avian from the day before added, "The people of this galaxy must see that even a diplomat is not beyond the reach of the Council's law." There were murmurs of agreement from several seats. Daniel could feel the weight of their decision building. Then the judge raised her hand, and silence fell again. "The punishment," she said, "will be carried out in full public view. Daniel of Earth, you will face death by ceremonial flame at the turning of the suns. This is the sentence of the council." The words spread through the chamber like a cold wind. Some in the audience looked satisfied. Others shifted uneasily in their seats. Death by ceremonial flame was a punishment rarely used. It was meant for crimes seen as unforgivable, a tradition older than many of the council's members. In the human gallery above, Commander Harris gripped the edge of the railing. His knuckles turned white. "This is madness," he said under his breath. The aide beside him glanced toward the guard stationed in the gallery and urged him to stay quiet. Daniel did not flinch. His voice was calm when he spoke. "You are not seeking justice. You are seeking fear. But fear does not last. Truth does." The judge gave no answer. She nodded to the guards, and they moved to take him away. As they led him through the side exit, Daniel caught sight of the recording drones, hovering near the ceiling. Their lenses followed him closely, broadcasting the moment to every corner of the city and far beyond. He knew Earth would see this. He knew his people would remember. Outside the dome, the crowd parted as the guards escorted Daniel toward the central plaza. The great square was surrounded by towering pillars carved with the history of the council. A raised platform stood at its center, with a metal frame that curved upward like an open flame. The ceremonial fire pit below it was empty for now, but workers were preparing the fuel. The suns climbed higher, their light striking the white stone of the plaza. The heat began to rise and the air shimmered faintly. The crowd was silent, watching every movement of the human prisoner. From a nearby balcony, Commander Harris stood with the other human observers. They had been allowed to remain in the city, but under strict watch. Harris could feel the anger in his chest like a living thing. His thoughts raced. The moment Earth received this broadcast, the Council would no longer face only words from humanity. Daniel was taken to a holding area just beneath the plaza. The small chamber was lit by a single strip of pale light. The guards posted themselves outside the door. Daniel sat again on a bench, folding his hands in his lap. He did not think of escape. There was no escape from this place. But there was still a message to send. He knew the execution would be public and that his last words would be carried across the galaxy. If the Council wanted to use his death as a warning, then he would make sure it became a warning for them instead. Above, in the plaza, the preparations continued. Workers in gray robes poured a fine oil into the fire pit. The metal frame was checked and rechecked. The council delegates took their seats in the ring around the platform, their robes bright against the white stone. By the time the suns were at their highest, the plaza was full. Delegates, citizens, traders, and visitors from other worlds, all, stood in silence, waiting for the moment. In the holding chamber, Daniel heard the steady footsteps of the guards approaching. The door opened. One of them gestured toward the light. "It is time," the guard said. Daniel rose without a word. His steps were steady as they led him up the stone ramp toward the open sky. The brightness of the suns made him blink for a moment, but he kept his head high. The crowd was vast, a sea of faces and colors stretching in every direction. The judge stood at the edge of the platform, her voice carrying across the plaza. "Let all gathered here bear witness. The laws of the council are not to be broken. This man is guilty. Let the sentence be fulfilled." Daniel was brought to the center of the platform. He looked out over the crowd. For a moment, the noise of the plaza faded in his mind. He thought of Earth. the cities, the oceans, the people, who had placed their trust in him. When the moment came for him to speak, his voice was clear and strong. "I came here for peace. I leave you with a promise. My people will not forget this day, and they will not forgive." The words echoed through the plaza, carried by the drones to every receiver in orbit. In distant star systems, humans watched, with silent rage. The judge gave the order, and the firekeepers moved toward the pit. Flames began to rise, casting sharp shadows across the white stone. The execution had not yet begun, but the council had already lit something far more dangerous. The fury of humanity. The suns hung high in the sky, pouring heat over the plaza. The white stone floor reflected the light so brightly that some of the spectators shielded their eyes. In the center of it all stood the raised platform, its metal frame gleaming like polished silver. Below it, the ceremonial fire pit had been prepared with layers of wood and oil, ready to burn bright and hot. Daniel stood calmly as the guards positioned him above the fire pit. His wrists were bound in front of him, but he did not struggle. His gaze swept across the plaza. He saw thousands of faces staring back, alien eyes of every color and shape. Some were curious, some were cold. A few seemed uneasy, as if they knew the sentence was more about politics than justice. High above, recording drones floated in a slow circle, their lenses locked on him. Each movement, each breath, each flicker of expression was captured and sent across the stars. Somewhere on distant Earth, millions were watching. He thought of them now. Families gathered around screens, soldiers pausing their drills, workers stopping in factories, all seeing him here in the last moments of his life. The judge stood at the edge of the platform. Her red robes caught the sunlight, the golden emblem of the council shining on her chest. She raised her voice so that all could hear. "This day will stand as a reminder," she declared. "The council's laws are above all. Those who violate them will face the consequences, no matter their rank or their world." Her words were followed by a long silence. The crowd waited. The air seemed to grow hotter. The firekeepers stepped forward. They wore long gray cloaks and carried tall metal rods tipped with small flames. As they moved, the crowd's attention sharpened. The first of them touched the flame to the oil-soaked wood. A hiss rose into the air as fire leapt to life. The flames grew quickly, orange and gold, dancing in the pit beneath Daniel's feet. Heat surged upward, making the air shimmer. The smell of burning oil drifted across the plaza. Daniel felt the warmth against his legs, but his face remained calm. From the human gallery, Commander Harris leaned forward, his fists clenched. His eyes were locked on the man below. "Hold on, Daniel," he whispered, as if the words could somehow cross the distance. Daniel took a slow breath. He knew this was the moment. His voice had to carry beyond the plaza, beyond the city, beyond this world. "I stand here because I chose to save lives," he said, his tone steady and strong. "If that is a crime, then let it be known that humanity will always choose to save the innocent, no matter the cost." The drones caught every word. In the control rooms of human ships orbiting far-off colonies, crews stopped to listen. In hidden corners of the galaxy, even some alien watchers felt a flicker of doubt. The flames climbed higher, their crackling filling the plaza. The firekeepers stepped back, their work done. The judge gave a small gesture to the guards, signaling that the sentence would proceed to its end. Daniel's eyes locked on the horizon. He thought of home, the blue oceans, the green hills, the sound of rain against the windows of his childhood house. These memories were not a weakness. They were strength. They were the reason he had come here in the first place. The heat was growing intense now. Sweat slid down his brow, but he did not bow his head. Instead, he looked toward the human gallery one last time. His gaze met Harris's. In that silent exchange, there was no fear, only a shared understanding. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice carrying over the fire's roar. "Remember this, all who watch. Earth will not bow to fear. Earth will not forget. You may end my life today, but you cannot end my people." There was a stillness in the crowd after those words, as if even the air had paused to listen. The judge's expression did not change, but her hands tightened slightly on the edge of the platform. She gave the final order. The guards adjusted, the frame lowering it slightly so the heat surrounded him fully. The flames rose higher still, bright enough to force some in the crowd to shield their eyes. From the balconies, the humans stood rigid. Harris's breathing was slow and deep, his mind already moving past grief to something colder, sharper, planning. He knew that Earth would see this as more than an execution. It would be an act of war. The suns began to shift toward the west, casting longer shadows across the plaza. The fire burned on, a steady roar that seemed to fill the air with its own heartbeat. In those final moments, Daniel lifted his head and looked to the sky. His lips moved in words too soft for anyone to hear. Then his gaze settled straight ahead, unflinching. The crowd remained silent. No cheers, no applause. Only the steady crackle of fire and the hum of recording drones carrying the image far across the galaxy. When the ceremony ended, the firekeepers moved forward once more, using their rods to break apart the embers. The guards stood at attention, their faces hidden behind visors. The judge turned away without a glance back at the platform. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Some spoke in low voices, others walked in silence, lost in their own thoughts. In the human gallery, Harris remained still, his eyes locked on the platform long after the fire was gone. Above the plaza, the drones drifted upward, leaving the Dome of Judgment behind. They carried their recordings to the city's communication towers, where the images would spread to every corner of known space. In distant starports and quiet settlements, people would see Daniel's final moments. Some would see only the Council's power. Others would see something else. The resolve of a man who refused to bend, even in the face of certain death. And somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who called Earth home, something had begun to stir. It was not loud, not yet. It was a silent promise forming in the minds of millions. They would answer. The message reached Earth in the quiet hours of the night. In the United Earth Command's main operations center, a faint chime broke the steady hum of machinery. A communications officer, seated at a large console filled with glowing panels, looked up as a red icon flashed across her screen. It was marked as a high-priority diplomatic broadcast from the Galactic Council. She tapped the panel. The image appeared in the air before her. Daniel standing on the raised platform in the council plaza, the fire climbing high around him. His voice carried clearly, even through the static of the transmission. The officer froze for a moment, her breath catching. Then she turned in her seat. "Admiral, you need to see this," she said. Admiral Reeves, a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward. He had seen many battlefield reports in his life, but the moment the image came into focus, his jaw tightened. Around them, other officers began to turn toward the display, their conversations falling silent. They watched in complete stillness as Daniel's last words rang out. "Earth will not bow to fear. Earth will not forget." The flames rose higher, the image burning into their minds as the council carried out the sentence. By the time the recording ended, the operations center was silent except for the low hum of machines. Reeves straightened, his voice calm but heavy, with weight. "Send this to the Council of Nations. Every leader needs to see it now." Within minutes, the transmission was on secure lines to the highest offices on Earth and across every human colony. Screens lit up in Capitol buildings, military command centers, and spaceport halls. In living rooms and on crowded city streets, the same image spread. the diplomat who had gone to seek peace standing tall in the face of death. In the capital city of Geneva, the Council of Nations gathered in a circular chamber. Large screens showed the plaza on Arvalis, the judge in red robes, the rising flames. The delegates, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, sat in silence as the scene unfolded before them. When the recording ended, Chairwoman Alvarez, leader of the assembly, leaned forward. Her hands rested flat on the polished table. "This was not justice," she said. "This was an act meant to break us." Around the table, voices began to rise. "It was a warning," said one leader. "They want the galaxy to see Earth as powerless," said another. Admiral Reeves, now standing at the edge of the chamber, spoke clearly. "Then they have miscalculated. Daniel's death will not make us weaker. It will unite us." On Mars, in the domed city of Redhaven, workers stopped their machines as the broadcast played on a large public screen. The miners and engineers stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the council's fire burn. Some clenched their fists, others simply stared in silence, their thoughts far away. In the asteroid colonies of the belt, small ship crews gathered in mess halls. The silence there was heavier. Many had known Daniel from earlier missions. They remembered his patience, his skill in dealing with even the most stubborn alien leaders. They watched as the council ended his life, and a cold resolve settled over them. Even in the outer colonies, where news from the core worlds often arrived late, the message arrived within hours. In a small agricultural settlement on Europa, children sat with their parents in the main community hall. The adults tried to keep their expressions calm, but their eyes were filled with the same promise. This would not be forgotten. By dawn on Earth, the reaction was everywhere. Crowds gathered outside government buildings. Candles were placed on the steps of the United Earth Embassy in dozens of cities. Across the digital networks, one image began to spread faster than any other. Daniel standing with his head held high, the flames at his back, and the words "Earth will not forget" written below. In the United Earth Command's war room, a large circular table was lit by dozens of screens showing fleet positions, supply routes, and intelligence reports. Reeves entered with several senior officers. The air inside was sharp with focus. Chairwoman Alvarez stood at the head of the table. "We cannot answer this with words alone," she said. "If we do nothing, we invite more." General Rao, head of Planetary Defense, nodded. "The Council believes we will hesitate. We must show them they are wrong." The officers began to discuss options. Some called for a direct strike on Council fleets. Others suggested blockading their main trade routes. Reeves listened carefully, then spoke. "We will not act in rage. We will act with precision. We will make every move count, and we will make it clear that this is not vengeance. It is the defense of our people's dignity." Maps of Council-controlled space appeared on the table's main display. Key systems were marked in red. Supply routes, communications hubs, and defense stations glowed like stars. Reeves pointed to several locations. "These are their strongest points. We will take them without harming neutral worlds. We show the galaxy that humanity fights with discipline, and that our strength is not to be tested." Orders began to flow across the human fleets. Shipyards accelerated their schedules. Pilots were recalled from leave. Special operations. Teams received sealed mission briefings. Far from Earth, in the deep shipyards of Titan, massive warships came alive. Crews ran power through their systems. Engines rumbled, and hulls glistened in the artificial light. In the orbital docks above Mars, sleek cruisers took on supplies and ammunition, their hull markings freshly painted with the insignia of Earth's united fleet. Everywhere, the same feeling spread, a sense of quiet readiness. The grief was there, but it was no longer still. It was moving, turning into something sharper. Back in the operations center, the communications officer who had first received the transmission sat for a moment at her console, watching the last frame of the recording. Daniel's face, lit. By fire, his eyes steady. She whispered softly to herself, "They have no idea what they've started." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council carried on its usual work, secure in the belief that Earth's anger would fade with time. But in the shadows of space, in the heart of every human settlement, the decision had already been made. They would answer. And when they did, the Council would understand what it meant to awaken the full might of humanity. The great underground command hall of United Earth Command was unlike any other room on the planet. Built deep beneath the capital city, its walls were thick enough to withstand the blast of a meteor strike. A massive round table filled the center, surrounded by glowing screens that showed the positions of fleets, colonies, and trade routes across known space. The room was full. Military leaders, political heads, and intelligence chiefs sat side by side. Chairwoman Alvarez stood at the head of the table. Her face was calm, but her voice carried the weight of the moment. "We meet today not for discussion alone," she began, "but for decision. The Galactic Council has taken one of our own in the most public and brutal way. They believed this would frighten us into silence. They were wrong. The only question is how we answer." The room was silent for a moment. Then Admiral Reeves leaned forward, tapping the table. A star map appeared in the air above it, red and blue lines tracing across the void. "The Council holds hundreds of systems," he said, "but they depend on only a few to keep their grip. These are their lifelines, the places we must strike." He pointed to several bright red marks. "Here, the Norin supply ring. Nearly all their food shipments to the inner worlds pass through these stations. Here, the Velthar relay. It carries most of their communications traffic. And here, their military assembly yards in the Dros sector. Take these, and the Council loses its reach." General Rao studied the map. "We can hit those targets, but the Council will move quickly to protect them. If we are not careful, we'll be dragged into battles we cannot win." "That is why we strike fast," Reeves replied. "We take their positions before they can react. We do not destroy what we don't have to. We make it clear to the galaxy that humanity is not here to rule, only to show that we will not be broken." From the far end of the table, Intelligence Director Kwan spoke. "Our information suggests that many Council member worlds are already uneasy about Daniel's execution. If we move with precision, we can turn that unease into open refusal to fight us. Some may even side with us quietly." Alvarez nodded. "Then our actions must be as much about message as about victory." The discussion shifted into planning. 3 main fleets would be formed. Fleet 1, under Reeves, would strike the Norin supply ring. Fleet 2, under Rao, would seize the Velthar relay. Fleet 3, a smaller force commanded by Captain Marin, would move on the Dros sector assembly yards. Special operations teams would infiltrate before the fleets arrived, ensuring defenses could be disabled without heavy civilian losses. In the corner of the room, Commander Harris listened without speaking. He had been at the trial. He had watched Daniel's last moments. Every detail of the plan sounded right to him. But he knew the fight ahead would test them all. When the main plan was set, Alvarez looked around the table. "Once we begin, there will be no turning back. Every human fleet, every colony, every citizen will be part of this. We must be ready to endure what comes." No one spoke against her. Within hours, orders began to flow through encrypted channels. In the shipyards of Titan, massive carriers rolled out from their docks, their hulls gleaming under artificial lights. On Mars, armored cruisers loaded supplies and weapons, their engines warming with deep, steady rumbles. Across the asteroid belt, patrol ships were recalled to join larger battle groups. In hidden training facilities, special operations teams prepared quietly. They studied maps of council stations, memorizing patrol routes and access points. Their orders were clear: disable the enemy's ability to fight before the main fleets arrived. Meanwhile, civilian networks buzzed with rumors. Most people did not know the details of the plan, but they could feel the shift. Factories ran day and night. Cargo ships carried strange, sealed containers. Military crews moved through cities in disciplined lines. On the outskirts of Earth's orbit, the flagship Resolute stood ready. It was a massive vessel, its hull black and angular, bristling with heavy cannons and shield generators. Inside its command deck, Reeves walked the length of the control pit, speaking quietly to his officers. "When the first shot is fired, the Council will throw everything they have at us, but they will not expect us to hit them in 3 places at once." Far across the system, Captain Marin's smaller fleet gathered near the dark side of the moon, Callisto. Their mission would be the most dangerous, striking deep into the Droz sector, far from reinforcements. Marin knew that speed and precision would be their only allies. In the war room back on Earth, Alvarez watched the progress reports with a careful eye. She thought of Daniel, of his calm defiance in the plaza. She thought of the millions who had seen him stand unbroken before the Council. This was not just about war. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would not allow itself to be humiliated without answer. As the fleets prepared to depart, Commander Harris was assigned to Reeves's flagship. Before boarding, he stood for a moment on the docking platform, looking at the distant curve of Earth. The blue oceans shimmered in sunlight, clouds drifting slowly across the surface. It was for this world, and for the colonies beyond, that they were going to fight. One by one, the fleets moved into position. In the dark of space, their hulls caught only faint glimmers of starlight. Communications were kept tight and silent. Each crew member knew their role, and none spoke of fear. In the last meeting before departure, Reeves addressed his officers. "The Council wanted the galaxy to see our weakness. Instead, they will see our unity. We are not here to burn their worlds or crush their people. We are here to show them that humanity will not be threatened. Every action we take must speak that truth." The officers nodded. The room was heavy with purpose. When the final readiness reports came in, Reeves gave the order. "Begin the operation." In the vastness of space, the 3 fleets ignited their engines. Streams of blue light flared as they moved out, scattering into the dark toward their targets. The war for respect had begun. Somewhere, far across the galaxy, the Galactic Council continued its daily debates, unaware that in the silent reaches of space, an answer was already on its way. An answer shaped not by fear, but by the iron will of a united humanity. The first sign came without warning. In the deep void near the Noran supply ring, Council sensors picked up movement that seemed impossible. Human ships, previously unknown in this sector, appeared suddenly from hyperspace lanes, their black hulls cutting through the stars like knives. The Council's fleet scrambled to intercept them, but it was already too late. Fleet 1, led by Admiral Reeves aboard the flagship Resolute, moved with precision. The ships spread out in coordinated formations, their engines silent until the last possible moment. When they appeared, they struck with speed and accuracy that stunned the Council forces. Defense turrets fired, missiles streaked across space, but every move had been anticipated. Humans disabled key systems with pinpoint attacks, leaving Council ships immobilized rather than destroyed. Captain Marin's smaller fleet executed the same tactic at the Droz sector assembly yards. Special operations teams had infiltrated ahead of time, cutting communications and disabling shields. When the human cruisers arrived, the Council crews had little time to react. Entire docking bays were locked down, their vessels trapped. The humans did not destroy them unnecessarily. They demonstrated strength, not cruelty. Across the Velthar relay, Fleet 2 struck like lightning. Communications arrays went dark, leaving council systems blind. Orders from command centers could no longer reach outer territories. The council had believed their network was secure, but human planning had already accounted for every contingency. In the council chambers on Arvalis, delegates were in chaos. Holographic displays flickered as reports poured in. "They are here," one exclaimed. "Entire fleets appeared in council space. How did they get past our defenses?" The presiding judge stood in silence, her expression unreadable. Yet even she could not ignore the reports. Council worlds were losing control in 3 major sectors at once. Panic spread among their members as communications failed, supply lines were cut, and key military positions were seized almost without resistance. Admiral Reeves watched the displays aboard the Resolute. His officers reported disabled council, defenses, ships surrendered, and key stations under human control. "We move fast but carefully," he said. "We are not here to destroy. We are here to show strength. Every target we take must send a message." Commander Harris, stationed at the tactical console, could not hide the satisfaction in his voice. "They are panicking. They never expected 3 simultaneous strikes. The Council underestimated humanity." Reeves nodded. "And that is why we are succeeding. They expected fear. We showed precision and strategy. Fear is what they planned to spread. Instead, we are spreading confidence in ourselves." In orbit above the Norin supply ring, human boarding teams moved quietly onto Council freighters. Their mission was to disable engines and weapon systems. Crews were instructed to avoid unnecessary damage. They followed orders with disciplined efficiency, demonstrating that humans could control technology and conflict alike. Back on Earth, the citizens watched the updates in real time. News channels displayed maps showing council sectors now under human influence. Analysts explained the precision strikes, emphasizing the restraint shown in operations. People cheered not for destruction, but for skill and unity. Humanity was acting as one. On one of the council worlds, a young delegate watched the news feed with growing doubt. Are they not killing indiscriminately?" she whispered to her aide. "They are controlling their attacks. This is not vengeance. This is strategy, and yet it terrifies me." Her aide did not answer. Both understood that the human display of power carried a message far deeper than any council speech. Humanity was strong, organized, and disciplined. They were no longer a species to be dismissed. Meanwhile, in the Dross sector, Captain Marin's team faced council resistance in one station. Council soldiers fired on them, but the humans moved with calm coordination. Shields and barriers fell one by one. The council defenders were unprepared for such precision. When the station finally surrendered, the humans held the crews at gunpoint, but treated them respectfully. No unnecessary violence was used. This balance of force and restraint shocked the alien observers. Fleet 2 continued across the Velthar relay. Relay nodes went offline in sequence. Messages could no longer travel freely. Ships in outer systems paused, unsure of orders. The Council's power structure began to crumble, all without humanity firing on neutral worlds. Reeves received the report from Fleet 2. "Excellent," he said. "They are blinded and disoriented. Continue to secure positions. But remember, control, not destruction." Commander Harris watched the Council's attempts to respond. "They keep trying to reroute fleets," he said. "They are scrambling. Every step we take leaves them one step behind. They never expected humans to move this fast or this smart." In orbit above Arvalis, drones recorded the human operations. The same systems that had captured Daniel's last moments now broadcast humanity's retaliation to the galaxy. Humans were precise, deliberate, and powerful. Daniel's promise that Earth would not bow and would not forget was now being realized in action. The Council finally convened an emergency session. "We cannot allow them to continue," one delegate shouted. They are taking entire sectors without mercy." Another shook his head. "Do not call it mercy or cruelty. They are demonstrating intelligence and unity. That is what terrifies us." Even the presiding judge acknowledged the truth. Humanity had become a force that could not be ignored. The Kabya execution intended to intimidate had instead unleashed the galaxy's most disciplined and determined response. On the human flagship, Reeves spoke to his crews over the internal communication system. "You have done well. Every movement, every calculation has shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Hold your positions. Prepare for the next phase. The Council will attempt to respond. But remember, we fight to demonstrate strength, not hatred." Crew members across the fleet cheered quietly. Some looked at one another and smiled. It was not just a military victory. It was a statement of unity, discipline, and determination. In the outer colonies, citizens heard of the successful strikes. Factories, farms, and stations celebrated not with destruction, but with pride in their species. Humans were standing, together as one, proving that they could protect themselves and assert their place in the galaxy. Even small Council-aligned planets began to hesitate. Reports of the human operations reached them, showing precision, restraint, and speed. Some governors quietly began to reconsider their loyalty. The balance of power was shifting, and the galaxy was taking notice. In the council chambers, panic had replaced confidence. Ships were immobilized, communication lines severed, and entire sectors had fallen to human control. The delegates realized, perhaps too late, that their decision to execute a single diplomat had triggered something far larger than any of them had imagined. Above the Norin supply ring, the human ships held formation. The stations were under control, their defenses neutralized. In the calm of space, there was a quiet satisfaction. The first strikes had succeeded beyond expectation. Humanity had acted decisively, but with restraint, demonstrating that power and morality could coexist. And across the galaxy, those who had witnessed Daniel's final moments understood something new. The human species could not be humiliated without response. The flames that had once consumed a diplomat had now ignited the full might of humanity. The Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. Across 3 major sectors, human forces had struck with speed, precision, and discipline that left even their most seasoned generals stunned. Communications were disrupted, supply lines cut, and key military stations controlled by humans. The Council's power, once absolute, was suddenly in question. In the council chambers on Arvalis, delegates spoke in hurried whispers. The presiding judge, still wearing her ceremonial robes, leaned back in her chair, her expression hard but thoughtful. "We underestimated them," she said quietly. "We believed that fear would make them bend. Instead, it has made them stronger." Outside, holographic displays projected news of human actions throughout the galaxy. Every planet, every station, every settlement could see the results of the retaliation. Humanity was no longer just a presence in the Council's view. It was a force. On the flagship Resolute, Admiral Reeves surveyed the outcomes. Fleet 1 held the Norin supply ring, Fleet 2 controlled the Velthar relay, and Captain Marin's fleet maintained the Dros sector assembly yards. Every operation had been carried out with minimal destruction and maximum efficiency. The humans had proven they could dominate strategically without unnecessary violence. Commander Harris stood beside Reeves, watching the reports as they came in. "They didn't expect this level of coordination," Harris said. "Every council, world is talking about it. Even those that hate humans are whispering respect." Reeves nodded. "That is the point. Strength is not measured only by power, but by discipline, unity, and restraint. Humanity has shown all 3. Back on Earth, Chairwoman Alvarez addressed the Council of Nations. "The mission is a success. The Council has been forced to recognize that humanity is united, capable, and decisive. This is not the start of a war for conquest. It is a declaration of our place in the galaxy. We act to defend, to assert dignity, and to ensure peace on our terms. As the human fleets continued to hold their positions, the Council finally called an emergency summit. Representatives from the affected systems gathered in a secure chamber on Arvalis. The mood was tense, and the weight of recent events pressed on every attendee. The Council's spokesperson addressed the assembly. The humans have demonstrated a level of strategic and operational skill we did not anticipate. Their actions show coordination beyond what we have observed in any species. Negotiations must begin if we are to avoid further escalation. The room was silent. Many delegates had expected Earth to strike in vengeance and destruction. Instead, humanity had acted decisively, precisely, and with restraint. That difference was more frightening than any fleet of weapons. Admiral Reeves represented Earth at the summit, standing calmly as the Council deliberated. His voice was measured, his posture firm. "Humanity does not seek conquest," he said. "We do not wish to rule your systems or destroy your people. What we demand is respect. Our diplomats, our citizens, and our world will not be humiliated. We have acted to demonstrate this clearly. You will recognize humanity as an equal member of galactic affairs. That is all we ask." A murmur ran through the Council chamber. Some delegates looked surprised. Others looked thoughtful. A few nodded subtly. The words were simple, but the meaning was unmistakable. Humans had proven that they could act when provoked, and they had done so without unnecessary cruelty. The presiding judge spoke next. "You have shown wisdom and restraint in your actions more than we expected. The Council recognizes that further conflict may be costly to all sides. We are willing to enter discussions to establish a new balance of power, one that respects humanity's place in the galaxy." Reeves allowed himself a small nod. He knew this was victory. Not only had humanity avenged Daniel's death, but they had also proven themselves capable of leadership, diplomacy, and restraint. This was the essence of the strength of a species united by purpose, guided by discipline and morality. In orbit around Arvalis, Fleet 1, Fleet 2, and Fleet 3 maintained their positions. Human ships patrolled key points, not to threaten, but to demonstrate capability. Civilians across the galaxy watched as humans did not destroy what they had conquered. They secured it. They protected it. And in doing so, they showed that power could be wielded responsibly. On Earth, citizens celebrated quietly, understanding that victory had been achieved not through rage or destruction, but through unity and intelligence. Streets were alive with cheers, not for war, but for humanity's strength and determination. Families gathered around screens to see the fleets holding positions in Council space, proud that their species had acted with both courage and honor. In the Council chambers, the delegates drafted a new agreement. It recognized humanity's rights and warned that future attempts to humiliate or harm Earth or its citizens would meet immediate and decisive response. The Council, once confident in their absolute authority, had learned the hard way that some species could not be controlled through fear. Admiral Reeves and his officers returned to the Resolute. He allowed himself a moment to reflect. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's full might, and it had been unlike anything anyone had expected. Humans had avenged Daniel, secured respect, and asserted their place without causing unnecessary suffering. "Commander," Harris spoke quietly beside him. "Daniel would be proud," he said. "He stood tall when everyone else thought he was helpless. Now the galaxy has seen the same thing. Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not forget." Reeves nodded. "This is only the beginning," he said. "But it is proof that when humanity acts together with purpose and discipline, no power can ignore us." The fleets began to withdraw slowly, leaving council sectors under human oversight but with local populations intact. News of the operation spread quickly, reaching the farthest colonies and neutral systems. The reputation of humanity had changed forever. No longer were humans seen as a minor presence. They were now a force to be respected, feared only for their capability, and admired for their restraint. In the quiet of the command deck, Reeves looked at the stars. "We have shown them who we are," he said, "not through destruction, but through resolve, discipline, and unity. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes us human." Commander Harris smiled. "And no one will ever forget Daniel's words now. Not the Council, not the galaxy. Earth will never bow to fear, and now everyone knows it." Above them, distant stars shone with calm brilliance. The fires that had once consumed a single diplomat had now ignited a new era, an era where humanity stood unchallenged in its courage, intelligence, and moral strength. The galaxy had witnessed the full might of humans, and it had been undeniable. The Council had learned a lesson they would never forget, and humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as a species that would defend its own, act with purpose, and rise in the face of injustice. The galaxy was watching, and now it knew the truth. Humanity would not bow. Humanity would not forget, and humanity would always rise stronger than before.